She thought destroying my career would secure her perfect wedding day. But when the billionaire groom saw what his bride had done, he whispered words that shattered her world forever. What happened next? Let me tell you how karma served justice on the coldest silver platter imaginable. If you love stories where justice prevails and karma strikes back, smash that like button right now and subscribe for more incredible, true stories that'll leave you speechless. My name is Amani, and 3 years ago, I thought I had finally made it. After working my way up from arranging small birthday parties to coordinating corporate events, I landed the position of senior event coordinator at the Grandview Palace Hotel. You know the type of place I'm talking about. Marble floors that gleam like mirrors, chandeliers that cost more than most people's houses, and a clientele that thinks money can buy them anything, including the right to treat people like dirt. I was 28, hungry for success, and carrying the weight of my mother's mounting medical bills on my shoulders. Mama had been battling cancer for 2 years, and every treatment, every specialist visit, every hope we clung to came with a price tag that made my stomach churn. But I was determined to give her the best care possible, even if it meant working 18-hour days and surviving on coffee and determination. Then the call came that I thought would change everything. Victoria Ashford. Yes, that Ashford family, the ones who owned half the commercial real estate in the city, wanted to book the Grandview Palace for her wedding. Not just any wedding, mind you, but what she called the social event of the decade. $2 million. $2 million for a single day that would secure my mother's treatment and finally give me the financial breathing room I'd been desperately chasing. I should have known from our first meeting that Victoria would be trouble. She swept into my office like she owned the place, which, given her family's wealth, she practically did. Tall, blonde, with the kind of confidence that comes from never hearing the word no. She looked at me with those cold blue eyes, and I saw something flicker across her face. Not quite surprise, but something close to it, like she hadn't expected someone who looked like me to be sitting behind that desk. "You're the coordinator?" she asked, her voice carrying just enough surprise to make it clear what she was really asking. I smiled my most professional smile and dove into the presentation I'd spent 3 days perfecting. I showed her portfolio after portfolio of my work. The tech mogul's wedding, where I'd transformed the ballroom into an enchanted forest. The senator's daughter's reception, where every detail had been featured in 5 different magazines. I watched her face carefully, looking for that spark of excitement, that moment when a client realizes they're in the right hands. Instead, I got polite nods and comments about wanting someone who really understands elegance and fits the aesthetic we're going for. But the commission was too good to walk away from. And honestly, I'd dealt with difficult clients before. I thought I could handle Victoria Ashford. For 3 months, I poured my soul into that wedding. I tracked down peonies in December, convinced a world-renowned violinist to fly in from Vienna, and personally taste-tested 47 different cake flavors until we found the one that made Victoria's eyes light up. I worked 16-hour days, slept in my office more nights than I slept at home, and slowly watched my vision come to life. The ironic thing is, I was actually enjoying the challenge, creating something beautiful, something that would take people's breath away. That's what I lived for. Even when Victoria would make her little comments about keeping things sophisticated or wondering aloud if I really understood the vision, I focused on the work. I had to. My mother's next treatment was scheduled for the week after the wedding, and this commission would cover everything. I had no idea that while I was busy creating Victoria's dream wedding, she was systematically planning to destroy my career. But more importantly, I had no idea that someone else had been watching me work, someone whose opinion would matter far more than I could have ever imagined. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs earlier. It started 3 weeks before the wedding, when Victoria began showing up to our meetings with this smug little smile, like she knew something I didn't. She'd ask pointed questions about my experience with high-profile events and wonder aloud if I was really ready for this level of responsibility. At first, I thought it was just pre-wedding jitters. Every bride gets nervous about whether everything will go perfectly. But then I started noticing other things. My hotel manager, Mr. Davidson, began asking me unusual questions during our check-ins. Had I been keeping proper documentation? Was I maintaining professional boundaries with the client? These weren't questions he'd ever asked before, and something cold settled in my stomach every time he brought them up. The real alarm bells started ringing when I overheard Victoria on the phone in the hotel lobby. She was speaking in that fake sweet voice people use when they're about to stick a knife in your back. "I'm just concerned about the level of service we're receiving," she was saying. "I mean, I'm sure she's trying her best, but this is my wedding day, and I need someone who really gets it, you know?" That's when I realized what was happening. Victoria was building a case against me, planting seeds of doubt about my competence. But why? The wedding plans were flawless. Every vendor confirmed. Every detail triple-checked. Every contingency planned for. I was delivering exactly what she'd asked for, sometimes going beyond her expectations. Then I found out about Gabriel. I'd been so focused on the logistics that I barely paid attention to the groom. Gabriel Sterling was this quiet, intense man who seemed more interested in observing than participating in the wedding planning. While Victoria would dominate our meetings with demands and changes, Gabriel would sit back and watch. I thought he was just one of those grooms who didn't care about the details. I was wrong. Gabriel had been asking questions about me, not about the wedding, about me. How long had I worked at the hotel? What other events had I coordinated? Had I always been this dedicated to my clients? The hotel staff mentioned it casually, thinking it was sweet that the groom was taking such an interest in ensuring his wedding was in good hands. But Victoria had intercepted some of these conversations, and now everything clicked into place. She wasn't just a demanding bride, she was a woman who felt threatened. In her mind, I wasn't just the help, I was competition. The way Gabriel looked at me during meetings, the way he listened when I spoke, the way he seemed genuinely impressed by my work. Victoria saw all of it, and she couldn't stand it. So she decided to eliminate the threat entirely. The blow came on a Tuesday morning, 3 days before the wedding. Mr. Davidson called me into his office with the kind of expression you never want to see on your boss's face. Victoria had filed a formal complaint, claiming I had been unprofessional, had stolen her ideas to use for other clients, and was clearly in over my head with an event of this magnitude. She's threatening to cancel the entire wedding and sue us for breach of contract if you remain on the project, Davidson said, avoiding my eyes. "I'm sorry, Imani. I know how hard you've worked, but we can't risk losing a client of this caliber." Just like that, 3 months of my life were erased. The commission that would have saved my mother's life, gone. My reputation in the industry, destroyed. My professional relationship with the most prestigious hotel in the city, shattered. As security escorted me out that day, carrying my personal items in a cardboard box, like some cliché from a movie, I saw Victoria through the lobby windows. She was smiling that same smug smile, already meeting with her replacement coordinator. She thought she had won. She had no idea that her victory was about to become the biggest mistake of her life. The wedding day arrived like a storm I wasn't invited to weather. I sat in my apartment, staring at the ceiling, knowing that right now, in some alternate universe where justice existed, I would be orchestrating the event of my career. Instead, I was fielding calls from bill collectors and trying to figure out how to tell my mother that her next treatment would have to wait. But the universe, as I was about to learn, has a twisted sense of timing. My phone started buzzing around 2 in the afternoon. First, it was Jessica, one of the hotel's junior coordinators. "Imani, oh my God, everything's falling apart here. The flowers are wrong, the sound system isn't working, and the caterers are 2 hours behind schedule." Then it was Marcus from the kitchen staff. "Girl, you need to know. Mr. Sterling has been asking about you all morning. He keeps saying, 'Where's Imani? Why isn't Imani handling this?' And the new coordinator doesn't know what to tell him." But the call that changed everything came from my friend Sarah, who was working the event as a server. She was whispering, clearly hiding in a bathroom stall or supply closet. Imani, you're not going to believe what's happening. Gabriel just found out the truth about why you were fired. He cornered Victoria's friend, who let it slip, about the complaint being fake. He knows everything. I could hear the chaos in the background. Raised voices, someone crying, what sounded like chairs being moved around frantically. The dream wedding was becoming a nightmare, and for a moment, I felt a dark satisfaction. But then Sarah said something that stopped my heart cold. He's been in love with you, Imani. Gabriel Sterling has been in love with you this whole time. The next few hours felt like watching a movie where I was somehow both the audience and the star. Sarah kept me updated through whispered phone calls and frantic text messages. Gabriel had confronted Victoria privately, away from the guests, and demanded the truth. When she tried to lie, he apparently pulled out his phone and played a recording. He'd been suspicious enough to record their conversation when she'd made the complaint. Victoria's carefully constructed lies crumbled in real time. Her racism, her jealousy, her calculated destruction of my career, all of it exposed in Gabriel's calm, furious voice. But the moment that still gives me chills happened at the altar. According to Sarah, who had positioned herself perfectly to witness the drama, Gabriel waited until Victoria was halfway down the aisle. She was radiant in her $50,000 dress, smiling like she'd won the lottery, completely unaware that her world was about to implode. As she reached him, Gabriel leaned in close. The guests probably thought it was a romantic moment, the groom whispering sweet words to his bride. But what he actually said was, "I should have been waiting at your altar." Victoria smiled, confused but pleased. "What do you mean?" she whispered back. And that's when Gabriel delivered the killing blow. In a voice loud enough for the first 3 rows to hear, he said, "Imani's altar. Not yours, never yours." The silence that followed was deafening. 300 guests, the wedding party, the vendors, everyone frozen as they tried to process what they'd just heard. Victoria's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, realization, horror, and finally, complete devastation. Gabriel didn't stop there. He stepped back from the altar and addressed the crowd like he was giving a business presentation. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry you've wasted your time here today. This wedding is canceled. The woman standing beside me destroyed the career of someone I deeply respect and care about because of her own prejudice and jealousy. I refuse to marry someone capable of such cruelty." Victoria's humiliation was complete, public, and absolute. 300 of the city's most influential people watched her world collapse in real time. And somewhere across town, I sat in my apartment, crying tears I couldn't quite categorize as happy or sad, or simply overwhelming relief that the truth had finally won. 20 minutes after the Gabriel's public declaration, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Honestly, I'd been sitting in my pajamas, eating ice cream straight from the container, and trying to process the surreal phone calls I'd been receiving all afternoon. When I opened the door, there stood Gabriel Sterling, still in his wedding tuxedo, holding a bouquet of peonies. The same peonies I had spent weeks tracking down for his canceled wedding. "I believe these belong to you," he said, and his smile was nothing like the polite, distant expression I'd seen during all those planning meetings. This smile was warm, genuine, and maybe a little nervous. "You created something beautiful today, even if it didn't go to the person who commissioned it." We talked for hours that night. He told me how he'd noticed me from the very first meeting. Not just my professionalism, but the way I lit up when I talked about creating memorable experiences for people. How he'd started asking questions about me because he was genuinely fascinated by my dedication and creativity. How he'd realized over the months that while Victoria saw our meetings as tedious obligations, they'd become the highlight of his week because of me. "I should have spoken up sooner," he said, running his hands through his hair. "When I heard the things she was saying about you, when I saw how she was trying to undermine you, I should have stopped it immediately. I was trying to handle it diplomatically, but I should have just called off the engagement the moment I realized what kind of person she really was." The truth was, Gabriel had been falling out of love with Victoria long before he fell in love with me. Their relationship had been more about social expectations and family connections than genuine compatibility. But meeting me, watching me work with such passion and integrity, had shown him what he was missing, what real connection could feel like. 6 months later, my life looked completely different. Gabriel hadn't just offered me a job, he'd backed my own event planning company, Elegant Moments by Amani. My first client? His business partner's anniversary celebration. Word spread quickly through his network, and suddenly I had more high-end clients than I could handle. The best part? Every single one of them hired me because of my reputation for excellence, not despite my background. My mother's treatment was fully covered, and she was responding better than the doctors had hoped. She loved teasing me about my fairy tale romance, especially when Gabriel would show up at her chemo appointments with her favorite flowers and terrible dad jokes that somehow always made her laugh. As for Victoria, karma had its own plans for her. The video of Gabriel's altar revelation went viral. Apparently, someone had been live streaming the ceremony. Her reputation in social circles was destroyed overnight. Her family, embarrassed by the public scandal and her exposed prejudice, cut her off financially. Last I heard, she was working at a small flower shop downtown, hopefully learning something about humility and treating people with basic human decency. Gabriel and I took our time building something real. We had our own wedding 2 years later. Intimate, beautiful, and planned by yours truly. As I walked down the aisle toward the man who had chosen love over social expectations, who had stood up for what was right, even when it cost him everything he thought he wanted, I thought about how Victoria's attempt to destroy me had actually led me to everything I'd ever dreamed of. Sometimes the universe has a sense of humor. Sometimes justice comes in ways you never expect. And sometimes the person who tries to tear you down ends up building the very bridge that leads you to your destiny. Victoria thought she was eliminating competition, but what she actually did was clear the path for true love to find its way. And honestly, I couldn't have planned it better myself. Can you believe how perfectly karma orchestrated that entire situation? I still get goosebumps thinking about the moment Gabriel whispered those words at the altar. Victoria thought she could destroy my life because of her prejudice and jealousy. But instead, she ended up destroying her own future while handing me mine on a silver platter. This story taught me that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually the universe clearing the path for something incredible. When people try to tear you down because of who you are, they're really just revealing who they are, and the right people will always see the difference. If this story gave you all the feels like it still gives me, smash that like button and hit subscribe for more incredible true stories where justice prevails and love conquers hate. What would you have done in my shoes? Drop a comment below. I love hearing your thoughts on how karma works in the most unexpected ways.